Good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to take a moment to echo Eleanor's comments and say a huge thank you to our partners and to you, our members, for your support during these unprecedented times, and for taking the time to log on to this session. Hopefully, a large number of you saw the insurer session at 1 o'clock today. And not unsurprisingly, this is one of our most popular sessions of the week. Lots of other great sessions throughout the week, including another panel debate tomorrow at 1 p.m, where we'll look at the legal and the credit hire markets and how the changes there impact all of us. And we've got three great keynote sessions. Ian Hughes, who's familiar to a lot of us through his presentations at ILC, he's the CEO from Consumer Intelligence. He's going to share some fascinating information around consumer behaviour and how they rate claim services. Over the 10 years we've been working with Ian, he's pulled some incredible data together to show what good looks like and what consumers think of the services that we provide. We've got a session from Greg at Mobileye. I would highly recommend this. This is one of the best kept secrets in the automotive sector. And then last but by no means least in terms of our keynote presentations, we've got Wellbeing Friday, where the CEO of Positivity and All Things Good, Stuart Baldwin, again, who many of you will be familiar with, will be doing a session that's just for you. Great for your employees and how they can stay positive during these difficult times. Final call for this evening's networking event, where we'll have a kickabout with Chris Kamara at 7:30. Not too late to register, and that's free of charge, like all our events this week. Great fun, chance to raise the profile of your business and tell us a joke or two. I've been genuinely bowled over by what an incredible job the team at ILC have done to make not just this event happen, but the weekly webinars they've been hosting in the home and motor sectors since the impact of lockdown began. Our audience has never been bigger, and if you'd asked me how an events business would fare in a global pandemic, I never would have thought it possible. We've grown our partner base, and I was really excited to announce last week that Zurich Insurance is our latest insurer partner. And like Eleanor, I can't wait to see you all face to face. But in the meantime, let's introduce our panelists. So we have a change to our published agenda, a last minute entry, a face that's too familiar to me and familiar to many of us. We've got Stuart Sandell, Assistant Vice President of Sales at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, replacing Adam Lovelock. So apologies to those of you that have tuned in just to see Adam. Stu assures me he'll do his best not to disappoint any of us, myself especially. We've got Neil Joslin, Chief Operating Officer at E2E Total Loss Vehicle Management. We've got Mark Holding, the MD at the Vela Group, and we've got Paul Sell, Director at Service Certainty. So we'll kick off, gentlemen, with some short introductions to your current roles, responsibilities, and how long you've been in the industry. I'll start with you, Paul, as you're on the left-hand side of my screen. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for me being a part of this panel. It's thrilled to be here, actually. So me personally, I was at Aviva for 23 years, which I left just over a year ago, 10 of which was in the supply chain, working across motor and home. And I always like to look for new ways of doing things. So I spent 2 years latterly in the claims innovation team, looking at how we could make changes to processes and technologies within claims. And now, having left there, now, as you say, Director at Service Certainty, which is a really exciting place to be at the moment, and which I'm sure we'll come on to in the conversation. And that's me, Chris. Thank you.
Another one that didn't have as tough a paper round as me. Neil, let's go to you next.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for inviting me to be part of this, Chris. My career to date really has been on the insurer side. I'm in my 35th year in insurance sector, which I appreciate is probably longer than most of the people tuning in, but that they've been alive. But so I've had a mixture of operational and technical roles throughout my career. Really pleased to be able to bring them together to be at E2E. I was thinking back actually, Chris, to when I first started work. And not long after I first started work, we had the storms of 1987. And it's not quite comparable to where we are now, but actually, you know, the chaos that brought across all of the insurance sector at the time, that was a really good learning curve for me back then. And it's funny how you kind of dig into those reserves to bring them out in an event like we're seeing at the moment. Yeah,
that's the stamina required for this. Probably slightly different, but to your point, definitely some lessons to be learned. Good afternoon, Mark. How are you doing?
Afternoon, Chris. Yeah, I'm good. Thanks for having me on. So a little bit about myself. I'm the managing director at the Vela Group. We're an accident repair group up in the northwest, 7 sites currently, soon to be 8. I have been here for 6 years, 2 as managing director, and prior to that 4 as finance director. Prior to that, I spent a couple of years out the industry, a genetics business called Genus PLC, and then before that, I spent 6 years at Howard Basford in the finance department there.
Great. You're obviously doing a great job of keeping Carl out of the office, because I don't think he's missed a single webinar yet. Good afternoon, Carl. And last but not least, my mate, Mr. Sandell. How you doing, Stu?
Good, thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me last minute. And I just want to say congratulations to you and the team at ILC for putting together what looks like a great week's event. Very creative, and I know all the other webinars have been, the ARC360 have been great. So I'm looking forward to participating now, and also watching them. The insurer session was great earlier. So I think I'm what's called an upgrade in the car rental industry. So my name's Stuart Sandall. For those who don't know me, I've worked for Enterprise for nearly 19 years. First decade of that was in the operational part of our business. And the next nearly a decade has been working with our insurer and assistance company partners, helping out with organising replacement vehicles. So providing transport for those who didn't want to rent one of our cars in the morning. As many of you know, that's seen our business expand into repair and technology. And for the last 3 years, I've been working particularly in our European countries of France, Spain and Germany, again in the insurance space. So hopefully I can bring some insight learned there. And then as of August 1, I will be heading back to UK and Ireland full-time and focusing my energies on our replacement division there, taking over from Adam, who's done a fantastic job, who's heading back to our rental operations as Vice President for Rental in our London and South East group. So delighted I could step in and get my feet wet straight away back in the UK insurance sector today.
Hot off the press. We like an exclusive here at Isle of Claims. Of course, I had a little inkling myself, but welcome back, Stu, and to your point, we'll miss Adam, but I'm sure we'll still see him at the odd industry event or two. So just a quick one to the audience. A few welcome backs in the chat, Stu. So it'd be great if we could get some questions from the audience throughout the course of the next hour. If, for my benefit, you could use the separate Q&A button instead of the chat, that would be great. If we don't get through all the questions in the session, and don't be shy, we will come back to you individually once we've had a chance to regroup after the session finishes. So we're going to focus the bulk of this on the future. The conference theme was Future Look, but it's impossible for us not to talk about COVID and the impacts on your businesses and your industries. So I'm going to take a quick whiz around the table. If maybe you could just give us a couple of key insights in terms of the impact it's had on your organisation, your industry, whether it be volumes, operating procedures, challenges outside of your own business that have impacted you and your people. I think that would be really insightful for the audience, because the great thing about this panel, we've got pretty much all aspects of the supply chain covered. So I'll start with you, Neil, if I may.
Okay, in March, at the end of March, we were announced we were going into lockdown. That was a bit of a shock, really. I mean, in January, COVID was something that was in another part of the world. So to have that thrust on us in March was a bit of a shock. In April, we saw volumes at about 30% of what we would expect. But that's been creeping back up. Activity seems to follow Prime Minister's messaging. So in mid-May, we saw another kick up. It's interesting, May, we were around 50% of volume, Chris, but the last week in May was about 40% higher than the first week in May. So we're seeing a pretty steady increase at the moment. And obviously our activity is purely linked to total loss vehicles that clients send through to us. So it's not a reflection of driving habit. It's not a reflection of what's happening in the wider business. It's purely total loss volume.
Thank you, Neil. Mark, I know you've shared a lot of insights with our audience, and I've found it personally beneficial in my own job on Webinar Wednesdays. I'm sure we've got some crossover with the audience today, but a lot of new viewers for the first time. So do you want to share a few insights from your world for us, please? Yeah,
sure, of course. Probably very similar to what Neil said. A lot of what we've seen has coincided with the government changes in their guidance, really. So, middle of March, we kind of could tell something was coming, and we're starting to just talk about what could happen, what would a lockdown look like. When the lockdown kicked in, it was immediate and abrupt. Our volumes dropped from a norm of 100% to low 20%. Thankfully, furlough was in place, and so we kind of mirrored our staffing levels to the claims volumes we were seeing coming through. And gradually, yes, we've seen a steady increase. Nothing drastic, and have basically relied on the furlough scheme just to kind of guide us through it. We did a lot of just stabilizing the ship, making sure that first of all we stemmed losses and got our capacity matching volumes, and then trying to really get to a break-even cash point of view, looking at government support in terms of grants and those kind of elements where they were relevant. And then really it's just been steady, just trying to follow the claims volumes, a bit like the earlier session. I think it's really difficult to look too far ahead. About 3, maybe 4 weeks ago, we saw a big spike in claims, and we all got excited. I thought I'd been a bit doom and gloom, the typical accountant, so I'd expected the worst, and it wasn't going to be as bad as I thought. But then immediately it came back down again. So thankfully we hadn't acted too soon. I've seen a bit of an increase now, but again, nothing drastic. We're still in the 60s to 70%. The interesting one for us is furlough changing from Wednesday really gives us a bit more flexibility to. I was going to ask you if you were going to make use of. I know a number of body shops had said that it's the part-time introduction from Wednesday, isn't it? Where you can bring people in and out more flexibly. Yeah, well, the big worry was always before that if I sent someone on furlough, then I'd lost them for 3 weeks. Yeah, and so you were trying to play that fine line between making sure you didn't carry excess cost, because that put pressure on the business that it didn't need, but also understanding that we've got a service to deliver, and so we can't run too lean. And so just trying to work that out, and knowing that you could furlough someone, but knowing that should there be a spike on following the 4th of July, the new Independence Day as they're calling it, which everyone's going to rush to the beach. No, that's already happened. Something like that. That really gives us some extra flexibility. So that should help, but obviously it will come with cost implications for us, starting from August. Sure. Paul?
Well, very similar to Neil and Mark in respect of, obviously, like everyone else, the volume suddenly went down very fast. And, we're here to support the rest of the motor claims industry. So we suffered just like everybody else in that respect. However, our pros, our professional photographers, continued to be available to support our clients, and did so in a really, really good way. And we were quite delighted with the amount of people that reached out to us as they were having to furlough staff or continue to with a flexible furlough arrangement, as Mark's just referred to. And then we've done a lot of work over the last sort of month or two because of the demand for technology. So like everyone else has just said, we're probably at about 50-60% now of volume with our pros, but our self-serve B2C digital products, we're already doing more now than this time last year, which probably just starts to show, I think, how people have engaged with technology and customers have engaged with technology during this process, and starting to be a bit more able to use the pros again. So yeah, I think like everyone else, it's been difficult. We were pretty much overnight a work from home organization. Being a cloud-based business, we're able to do that pretty easily. And I think then we've looked at how we can do integrations and collaborations during this period, which I'm sure we'll come on to later in this conversation in more detail.
Yeah, absolutely, we will. Thank you. And Stu?
I think for the context of this, similar kind of story with our business that's linked to motor claims, but Enterprise as a global organisation is intrinsically linked to the travel sector as well. So I think the rent-a-car industry, it's safe to say that the impacts have been absolutely profound of the coronavirus pandemic. Global business and leisure travel has gone to virtual zero, and we've seen the catastrophic implications of that in rent-a-car businesses in our sector, particularly in North America. That the industry, probably 2/3 of its volumes go through business and leisure travel. For Enterprise, it's a bit different, and I guess that's why we're sitting on a panel like today, and that we've got a very rich, diverse mix of business. So probably less than 1/3 of our business is so tied to the airport travel industry. But we had to react incredibly fast. I think we saw some things coming. We had the benefit of foresight with our business in China giving us an idea of what was going to happen. Germany, Italy, Spain, France, all kind of going into lockdowns earlier. And we really focused on a couple of really important things. The first thing was keeping our employees and our customers safe. So we needed to ensure we had a safe place to do business, particularly our rental offices. And then secondly, what I think a lot of people didn't realise until this happened, certainly in the wider community, is how much frontline and essential services relied on us to, as we coined the phrase, keep Britain moving. So we're providing vehicles to NHS, health service, frontline workers, military, building of like the Nightingale hospitals and what have you. So we had to ensure that we were able to open our branches or open up selections of branches and keep reservations flowing through for our customers and our key insurer customers and assistance customers, particularly for those people that really needed their vehicles. And then we implemented changes to our cleaning. We've brought about something called the Complete Clean Pledge, which is our new standards for cleaning across our global infrastructure. So, the impacts have been far-reaching and are still very much being felt at the moment. As expected, the first sector of our business to begin to recover is that's linked to people's own vehicles and miles driven. So as traffic volumes have increased across all the markets, we've seen our replacement volumes begin to recover as well.
Makes sense. Thank you, Stuart. So you touched on something there in terms of consumer sentiment around Clean Car Pledge, and it was one of the things that the insurers talked about earlier. Victoria in particular kind of honed in on that customer behaviour. What have you seen different from consumers? You mentioned, Paul, greater propensity to use technology to take and send images is an obvious one. Have you seen anything, Neil, in terms of differences in consumer behaviour during lockdown?
Yeah, lots of different things.
Sorry, Steve.
Sorry.
I know you're back and you've been missing for a couple of years and you've got a lot you'd like to say, but that one was for Neil.
Beg your pardon.
You are.
Have we seen anything different? Possibly not, actually. I mean, our network collects from customers, collects from repairers. I think that the whole period actually has taught us to listen probably a little bit more to our customers. They're clearly, some customers were self-isolating, some customers were vulnerable and a bit worried about somebody else coming around. And so we've been able to flex our processes around that, Chris, and probably more so in truth than we would expect to do normally. But in terms of, are we seeing anything different certainly from our customer base? I wouldn't say so, actually. Certainly not for the collection and the safe storage of total loss vehicles.
Yeah. And I guess not so much one step removed, but probably a more emotive part of the journey is getting that vehicle, that pride and joy repaired. So, Mark, how have you found consumers in that whole sort of approach to engaging with you as a repair business? Has there been much different?
Yeah, very much so. And it's changed quite a bit as we've kind of gone through the last 3 months, in a level that you'd never expect, people's behaviour to change as drastically and rapidly, really. I think, throughout April, there was a real reluctance to really even engage, especially from the mobile side. There was a lot of customers that really just didn't want to even think about it. We had a lot saying, come back when coronavirus has been cured, that kind of sentiment. And then as we headed through May, I think they realised maybe it wasn't going to go. So they started reaching out to us a bit more and saying, right, I want to proceed with it. And I'd say now, really, it's actually gone even further, where we're having to remind customers that there's coronavirus out there and processes are going to change. So in the space of 3 months, we've gone from not wanting to engage because I'm worried about safety to starting to tentatively come back to the third point now, where we're the ones doing the talking and saying, look, there's going to be changes, and they're almost apathetic towards coronavirus, which is interesting. The spectrum of change in such a short period of time has been drastic. And again, I think it corresponds with what you see on the news. You wouldn't have seen what we've seen over the last couple of weeks in April. So we've had that bit, and then I suppose from a feedback point of view, our net promoter scores went through the roof. And one of the key bits is trying to be not that complacent, because when you go past the numbers and get into the verbatim, some of the comments are actually quite similar, and those that, not that we ever got any or many, but someone who maybe scored us less than a 9 or a 10 was maybe leaving a comment that would have scored us less previously, but then still scoring us 9 or 10. So one of the bits we've had to be careful of is people's acceptance on the level of service they got was, they were willing to score higher, maybe even when we dropped the ball a little bit. But again, we have seen that to change already. So it's something that, as an industry, we need to make sure then we're giving our service to our insurance partners, that we have acted on that, and we haven't maybe got a little bit complacent, that customers are willing to accept extended key-to-key time, for example, for a long period, because I think for a lot of customers, they are starting to get back to normal ways of thinking, and it is actually us that are having to inform them that there are changes to how we interact, receptions either closed or limited, and appointments only, and those kind of things. So it's us that's having to push that rather than them.
I want to come back to that whole re-engineering service levels and just draw some points from the insurer section. But Stu, I know in your role in Europe, you've been a big part of the team commissioning some research around consumer sentiment and approach to transportation in general, which impacts all of us on this panel today and most of our audience. What sort of things can you share from that research?
Yes, I think the recent consumer research, I think what it points to in this environment really is we were surveying our renter sentiment survey around people's attitudes towards different modes of transport and what they would feel most comfortable travelling in. And what was really interesting was it was overwhelming that people would be comfortable in a private motor vehicle. So we had 60% of our survey respondents saying they would be comfortable in a rental vehicle, where only 6 or 8% would be happy in an Uber or a taxi. And when we dug into that, that was down to the not knowing who'd been in the seat kind of before you kind of approach. And if you play that out with public transport and what we're seeing through sort of mobility data now, you can see that a consumer's favourite route of travel is something that feels as much like their own vehicle, if they own one, as possible. And things like public transport are clearly being avoided. So it came up on your previous session as well about that. More miles driven at the moment. It's hard to tell what the miles being driven are. Are they still commutes or are they different journeys? But we're certainly seeing a consumer sentiment towards, clean, safe place to be. And, I think with organisations like our own, having something like a complete clean pledge gives a consumer confidence to work with us. And I know that, the repairers are making sure they're doing their clean standards for their customers' cars when they're handed back to them as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that I want to tackle now, which is, so I guess one of the things I'm seeing just on the back of that consumer sentiment, and you can see it with young people who had fallen off a cliff in terms of car ownership and desire to even learn to drive, now definitely see the car as a bubble, a safer bubble to move from A to B. But we're also seeing across Europe, I was on a call earlier today, and in France there are some elections, and the Green Party, as our government affairs team had predicted, there's a real, I wouldn't say sea change, but I think certain areas of politics are looking at this as an opportunity for climate change, green, to take a stronger footing. Yet that directly contradicts, so, making London a pedestrianised zone directly contradicts the consumer sentiment that actually I want to be in a car, not on a tube. So I think there's a very interesting opposed sentiment there. But Paul, you mentioned consumers are looking to use images more. That's an obvious kind of step change. What other sorts of collaboration and long-term change do you think we're going to see coming out of the back of these recent events?
Well, I think that's a good point, because a lot of the collaboration has been fantastic in the last few weeks or even the last couple of months. And one of the recent ones we've done, particularly with CAP, is a great example of how not only can you integrate technology easily to allow people to use the ability to capture media in an easier way, but how you can then share that through the supply base. So you start to get a collaboration of how that media not only is brought in, but also shared out with all of those through the chain. And I think that Richard, Vicky, and Greg, I think, in the last call, all talked about having flexible working arrangements, and whether that's with people or processes or technology, but actually the ability to use either a flexible workforce that we have available around the UK or technology in the way that I've just described should hopefully really help bring together the supply chain at a time where actually collaborating and integrating with each other just makes life easier, creates efficiencies, helps to bring down costs, which obviously insurers need, as well as making things easier for the consumers.
Yeah. Sharing things, whether it be best practice. We were talking offline, Mark, and I think it featured in the ARC 360 debate last couple of weeks ago, and I tried to mention it in the insurer debate earlier today. If we take, to your point, Stu, the clean car pledge, that sort of requirement to sanitise customers' vehicles, I'm guessing, Mark, you work with multiple insurers, and one of the dangers might well be that each insurer puts a different process, price, therefore, determines a different way of doing things. How do you think we can deal with that kind of complexity as an industry?
Yeah, I think it's always a difficult one. And again, I think they covered it quite well in the earlier session. Obviously, there's a lot of competition out there, and people are looking for market differentiators quite a lot, and anything to get slightly ahead of their competitors. But I think when it comes to something safety related like this, I think this is something where we can all join together around something, and I don't know exactly what that is, but we have done it before with certain standards, where we've agreed that this is the approved industry standard for something, and really make sure that we don't add any extra complexity in where we have the insurer A way to clean a car and we have insurer B's way to clean a car, both which set out with the remit of keeping their customers safe, but in a slightly different way to each other, because from our side that just brings complexity. And when you're looking at something safety related, you really want to make it not simple as in basic, but simple as in easy to follow and repeat. So that's going to be a key requirement of it. I just don't think again, it was mentioned earlier on the earlier session, I don't know if we've quite got the right forum or the right vehicle to bring that together yet. So we are needing something that can bridge the whole supply chain and make sure that we have something that is usable by all without giving any one person a particular advantage or anything, because it is something that's where we are putting safety first rather than anything else.
There's no competitive advantage to be gained from, my claims process will clean a car more than yours. I agree. It needs to be an industry standard, but there isn't a forum, and we don't have a great track record of creating industry standards. So the panel has found the keyboard. The audience. We're getting some great questions coming through. This one was actually on my list. Great minds think alike, or idiots never differ. From Rob Smale. Your business will have implemented all sorts of things to cope with COVID-19. Which ones will you retain in your business when normality or near normality resumes? I'm going to ask you that one, Neil, first off.
You might think that question's planted from Rob, and it's honestly not.
No, I just realised that by going to you first, that it does look rather staged. And Rob, of course, knows that I meant great minds.
What will we retain? I think that obviously clearly COVID has been a challenge for businesses, but I think it's been a great learning opportunity for us as well, right? And we've learned so much more about our own team, first of all, and probably had it reinforced how flexible our own team are. I mean, we for example, Chris, part of our BCP was already our fallback plan was to work from home, and we've been testing that over the last 18 months. So when we had to switch to working from home immediately, that was done very easily, and it was just one less thing that we had to worry about, and our team managed that transition extremely well. Subsequent to that, of course, we've had a lot of guys saying can't wait to get back in the offices, but I think that going forward we'll be much more open to having a better balance between home working and office working. I think there's a certain, I don't think for us, I don't think that we'll ever be in a position where we'll all just be working from home. I think there's certain things that you wouldn't pick up working from home that you get in an office, that osmosis of learning and coming up with great ideas, etc. You would just lose from working from home, and you're in danger of creating some silos. So that's not something that we're looking at. In terms of how we service customers and clients, I think that technology is great, and clearly some good technology ideas have come forward during the pandemic. But I think it's also been a really good reminder to us of what's really important in our service delivery, and spending a bit more time on that important stuff. So we mentioned earlier on about, customers that are self-isolating or vulnerable. and they've got different issues that we can help with, and it's almost like problem solving at a lot of different jobs. And I'd like to think that we don't lose sight of that when we get back to full complement of staff and a full complement of volume. You know, that customer piece has really come through quite clearly there. I think the other thing I'd mention is, and Paul mentioned this, is how well we've been able to communicate with our insurance partners through the lockdown. To the extent that, you know, some insurance partners have been so open with us, sharing their own data of actuals and forecasts to help us plan for our service delivery for them, you know, and that's true partnership. And I think that an observation that we made very early in E2E was that insurers were relying on their supply chain to help. But prior to that, there'd been very little dialogue around business continuity, you know, and what role the supply chain would take in the event of, you know, I don't think any of us quite saw lockdown and the COVID pandemic coming. But in the event of a business continuity need, what role would suppliers take in that? And I'd like to think that going forward, those discussions at that level will continue, and they'll be much more regular, so that we're all a lot clearer about how we can help deal with the same issue, just in a slightly different way.
That's a great point, Neil. I'm going to try and end the debate on some of the points that the insurers made around what we think partnerships, supplier agreements should look like moving forward, you know, if there are any learnings we can take. Paul and Mark, I'm getting some great questions through all around the cleaning and sanitisation process. So Paul, I'm going to draw a little bit on your previous experience as an insurer and get your thoughts on this, and Mark as somebody who's at the sharp end of this. So let me just try and bundle some of these questions together. So we've got Mike White who's saying, are insurers specifying a certain sanitisation process, and are they requiring any evidence that it's been carried out? We've also got a great, if not controversial, question from an anonymous attendee, not surprisingly. Should the cost of safety, therefore the cleanliness piece, be passed on to the insurer or the supplier? For instance, a supermarket charging additional fees for sanitisation. And again, I think, you know, we've all got different hats on there, but Paul, what do you think the insurer's approach to the clean car piece, if we stay on body repair, where I think we're dealing with the customer's own asset? What are your thoughts on that?
I suspected you might ask me a question with my old hat on, Chris. It's taken me a year to get rid of that hat and put a new one on, so I can find it in the cupboard somewhere. I think what I've heard in all of this, there have been a lot of webinars and a lot of discussion groups, as we all have, which has been fabulous, by the way, because I think that as an industry we've talked a lot and shared a lot of experiences. And what I've heard almost continuously from the insurers that have been on those calls is that they are listening. They are genuinely listening to not only what customers need and want, which is, as Stuart was saying earlier, they want things to be safe and clean, but also what the suppliers can do to do that. So I think what insurers will want in this is they'll want to be able to provide something that meets those customers' needs, that suppliers can do and are happy to do, and of course won't cost the earth. You know, let's be honest, they'll want to do something that is fair and proportionate for what the current situation requires. But obviously I'm not there anymore, Chris, but I'd be surprised if any insurer wouldn't be looking to be able to pay for the appropriate cleaning services to make customers feel safe. That's just, and I've not seen any sign of that in all the calls I've been on. In fact, quite the reverse. So I think this collaboration that we're seeing And I think a real transparency of conversation, Neil referred to it earlier as well, actually, is really quite heartening. Shouldn't have taken a global pandemic to work in a really open and transparent way, but it's good that it's coming through and can only be beneficial for all of us.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we'll talk some more about that whole, how can we harness, maintain that collaboration and partnership approach. But Mark, without, naming individual companies, what are you seeing on the spectrum from A to Z in terms of demand, specification, willingness to support, any contractual changes? How's that whole thing been addressed from your vast customer base?
At the moment, we're not seeing anything contractual or mandatory. I think from the conversations I'm and the team are having with our insurance customers, I think a lot of them are getting questions from upstairs in the hierarchy about what they are doing to protect their own customers and looking for reassurance there. So there's nothing hard or fast, and that's why I think it's important that we talk about it now before people start to make any firm decisions on stuff like that. In terms of support, it's going to be a contentious one, isn't it? Just because of the way a lot of insurers traditionally reimburse repairers for fixing cars. Should they pay for cleaning? Should they pay for mobility? Should they pay for estimate fees? The list goes on. So I think it will come down to, I guess, the relationship with that insurer and the conversations had with them on how best to reimburse. Again, it may be something we talk about later in terms of which way is price going to go. But I think a lot of that is dependent on the supply chain and the interactions there, isn't it? I don't think, unlike I think there should be a standard way of cleaning, I don't agree in a standard pricing model or way of reimbursing. I don't think that works because it doesn't work for insurers and probably doesn't work for suppliers either, because how we go about doing things and the interactions we have with our customers and the arrangement we have should be unique to that, really. So but we are seeing a broad range from nothing to quite a bit to some insurers helping in other areas of the supply chain outside of the cleaning the cars, but just saying that we're looking at the actual cost base and we're open to changing what we pay for or how we pay for it. Yeah. So it's quite a broad one, and I don't know if that actual reimbursement one is one that does need a broader thing. I think that is for a supplier to customer interaction as opposed to the actual what takes place, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think insurers being able to articulate to their customers what's going to happen, what to expect. So almost, having that detail to be able to articulate it at the notification of loss, I think is an obvious one for me that probably isn't happening yet, because giving customers comfort around the supply chains that they have built, where they have more control, contractual levers, etc., does seem to make more sense than ever. Stu, I'm going to go back to Rob's question. A very wise man in our business said to me the other day that a lot of the things we've done on the back of COVID-19 have simply, we were doing anyway. COVID-19 has simply supercharged them. So what do you think in terms of changes we've made that are here to stay in the enterprise business?
Yeah, so I think the biggest changes for us is going to be the way we interact with customers, consumers, actually how we hand vehicles over to them and spend time with them. So we're a massively people-focused business, and that won't go away. But what we were working on pre-COVID was a lot of pieces around customer experience and customer excellence, and improving our processes from the point of receiving a reservation to handing a car over to a customer. Which wasn't the greatest process in the industry. If you think about renting a car at an airport, you stand at a counter, you talk to somebody at the top of someone's head while they take notes of information that you could have given them, before the event. So We, from right at the top, have become laser focused on what we're calling low and no touch rentals, which is where we're going to be able to get customers on a mobile app to be able to have effectively like a boarding pass, so they can take their vehicle at a branch or elsewhere but quickly. And that soon leads into where connected vehicles come into play, and taking a car from a fixed location, be it a roadside, be it a repairer, but not necessarily needing to carry out any actual physical paperwork and validations at the time. And we've directed a lot of resource into speeding that process up. It's on pilot now, and it'll be in Europe in the next 30 to 60 days, our rental pass. And I think that's going to be something that will stay with us. It was a path we were on. I think we've just got there a damn sight quicker. Yeah.
And I think we've all got experiences of things happening more quickly, and long may it continue. Long may it continue. So I'm going to sort of head us into the final kind of piece of the debate, which I think is, for me, the most important message for us to leave, and I think it'll get some great comments from our audience. We've all mentioned it already, but to quote an anonymous attendee, do we genuinely believe that we will see collaboration? It shouldn't have taken coronavirus to make people open their eyes and realise that this is a complex industry, made so much harder because of people's desire not to work together. And I guess for me, some of that is that competitive advantage piece. I'll start with you, Paul, but how do you think the industry can learn from this and can better work together in that supplier agreement framework moving forward?
Well, I think it's all about flexibility, Chris. So we heard in the Insurer Panel conference earlier about having flexible working arrangements, about having a balanced approach to using outsourced partners to help with that flexibility, either through COVID or as they know coming out of COVID, or really starting to strengthen those contingency plans for potential second peaks to what might be around the corner. So I think for us it's around collaboration on not just technology, but actually how flexible workforces, such as what we have, and or technology, can help not only on a day-to-day basis, but can also adapt those business models as they need to during peaks, surges, or drops in the way in which we've seen in the last few months. And having an openness around the business problem, and then having an openness around how they can solve that, and being able to work quite quickly. I mean, we've mobilised very quickly for a number of people in the last few months, and I hope that's therefore helped people realise you can do things quickly whilst covering all the appropriate risks, and put in place something that can be very flexible.
Yeah.
That's what I would see is the key to these collaborations going forward.
So contracts that flex a bit more, maybe.
You can always put contractual words around the arrangements once they're in place. It shouldn't stop you from being able to do what you need to do in the moment to put in place what's required. Then you can wrap the appropriate contractual commitment around it. But I think certainly in the last few months, the speed at which people have moved, the speed at which we've moved, it should be a massive positive to take from what has been, let's face it, a horrendous period for all of us.
And I'll come on to you, Mark, and I'll just try and tick off a question from Mike Monaghan, who's been helping body shops longer than Neil Joslin's been working in the claims industry. And I think this is related to the sort of flexibility we need. And our biggest dilemma, which is what does the new norm look like when it comes to volumes going forward? We can debate that all day, every day. So does the panel, and I'm going to put this one to you, Mark, as I said, accept future capacity management of volumes will require big changes, or will work in progress still be needed, which only adds cost? And I suppose this segues a little bit into the service levels piece, so maybe being able to pull claims through in a more structured manner rather than this has to be done by Monday at 4 o'clock. What are your thoughts on that point, Mark?
Yeah, no, it's quite an interesting question, and all these kind of pulled together. I think from a work in progress point of view, and volumes, and will we need so much around us that adds cost. I think until we fix a big part of our supply chain, which probably had the biggest impact, which is parts availability. I think we're always going to have a need to look at the system condition that is there because of that. That means we can do certain steps to try and alleviate that. Estimating the vehicle before it comes on site. Nice plug for you there, Paul. But or other bits like that. That there are certain elements we can do. But I think whilst that parts availability and sourcing is still quite clunky, and you really don't know what you're going to get through the door each day. You're always going to have to build a bit of fat in there, mainly because we are dependent on a certain level of volume to make profits. We can't have huge drops in output, as we've seen. That's why we've had to get that there. So I think that's a key one. And in terms of just following up with how we engage with insurers and communicate around them, it was really interesting how when this all impacted, a lot of mandatory things that we would have to do, and SLAs were relaxed quite a lot, where insurers said, "Oh, you guys need to concentrate on fixing cars and looking after customers, so we're going to not ask you to do these things." And you kind of think, okay, so as we move back to normal, does that mean they need to come back in?
They'll be back on you.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting. You go, I hark back to one of the first webinars. I think it was with Eddie Longworth, and he was talking about the different levels of relationship you can have, and different insurers. Some like to have a transactional relationship with their network, and forever will just be that's how it is. You can take it and do it, or you can not. And there is those that do want to get a bit deeper into it and look at jointly trying to remove waste from both elements. They obviously both work. Otherwise, I don't think both would give it a go. But I think where we found is that what's worked for us a lot over this period is those insurers that have allowed us to continue to do what's right for the customer, for the car, for their business, and for ours. And I wouldn't ever go as far as calling it a partnership, especially from a repairer side. It's just not a joining of equals. It is a supplier-customer relationship, but that doesn't mean it has to be an arm's length transactional one. Yeah. So I think as long as we can continue down that route, that there's some real good wins, and that will enable us to deal with peaks and troughs that come, hits to volume through second lockdowns and those elements. I think as long as we keep that conversation going and that flexibility, I think we'll be okay.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and I think a good realist view that says actually a body shop group, despite being the size of the Vela group, to be considered as an equal with a global insurance company. That's not what we're after. I suppose it's a little bit more of walking the walk, because partnership is talked about probably a little bit too often. Stu, you've got a huge amount of experience of dealing with insurers and replacement businesses across the whole of Europe. How do you think, what do you see in terms of best of breed in relationships there at the buyer-supplier side of things?
I was just thinking about that, the beginning of that question, Chris, around collaboration as well, when you were talking to Paul and Mark. And, my experience in Europe would tell me that actually, a bit like most things when it comes to motor insurance, whether it's distribution or claims, we are quite a long way ahead in the UK. So I think there is more collaboration, and has been more collaboration for a longer period of time than anywhere else I've seen. I think I see a lot more of panels of suppliers, and I think that in Europe that's really coming home to roost as a bad practice now. Real struggle with supply when demand increases. I think there's they don't throw around the term partnership very often. You very much are a supplier. And I think it's fair to say in the UK there are definitely partners who you would call partners, and partners who you'd call suppliers. And we very much try to collaborate with the insurers. But I actually think there's a piece in there around collaboration within the supply chain itself as well. And I think some of the work with the network insight stuff that Ollie Chambers and the Integral team have been doing, whether it's around parts supply or whether it's around geographical claims tracking, I think that stuff lives on as well, like the things we were talking about earlier. So I think collaboration should naturally happen if you want to innovate and evolve as a business. I think my hope always, and sometimes I use the term hope, is that that's recognised when you get into a buying cycle. Because I sometimes think in a buying cycle, that can be forgotten in the quest for what's seemingly the lowest price, rather than recognising that value that's been delivered over a long term and often across a group of suppliers. So for me, it's back to the same, cost and value or cost and price piece.
Neil, yeah, I couldn't agree more, Stu. And I think, Neil, I'll finish with you on this one point. And I guess I'd like to for you to look at this through a slightly different lens, which is it takes two to tango. And I think as suppliers, we're probably all guilty of trying to sell what we've always sold, trying to offer solutions in line with the way we've always offered solutions or that we think's best. And you mentioned earlier, Neil, that, conversations you'd had with your insurers that and customers that you'd dearly like to continue going forward. Is there a look in the mirror moment that says, do you know what, I could have, should, or always have been asking these questions? Sorry, you're on mute, Neil, I think. First time in 2 webinars.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, we're quite hard on ourselves actually internally, and constantly we ask those questions anyway, Chris, and damn sure that if we don't ask those questions of ourselves, then somebody on our board will ask that question. But there's always more that can be done. But I think that just picking up from what the guys have been saying, and I've got to say, I think they've made some really good points there. And certainly from the session earlier on with the insurers are clearly open to finding a more effective way of working with their supply chain. And I think that, the opportunities certainly are there. We shouldn't lose sight of actually what some of the things that we try and solve or provide as a supply chain network. We shouldn't lose sight of the really important things. Some of the things come in and they kind of fluff around the edges, but actually, and again, I think that lockdown has really taught us or reminded us of how important some of the core services are and the way that you approach some of those core services. But, what wider than that, I think that if it's in your DNA as a company that you're always trying to improve and do better tomorrow than you did yesterday, and for sure those questions about how does that collaboration piece look, what more do I need to get better and provide a better service, and some of those things are within your control and some of those things are not within your control, and where they're not, I think you need to open those channels of communication to make sure that you have the information that you need to provide a better service.
That's great advice, Neil. Thank you. I'm going to bring the debate to a close. We've run over a little bit, and I'm sure people have meetings after this one before we meet up again this evening. A final thank you from me to you, our panel. Great insight. Thank you for giving up your valuable time and sharing with the audience your learnings and advice. And, to quote you word for word, Neil, our goal at ILC is to help the industry be better tomorrow through what we've learned today. So hopefully there's a few takeaways for everyone. Thank you to Enterprise, our headline sponsor, to E2E, to Copart, Carpenters, Autoglass, GT Global, trying to read these logos back to front on my screen. S&G Response, SureTrack, Innovation Group, Thinco, And I'm sure for Carpenters Group, I'm sure I've missed somebody off there, and I will make up for it later. But thank you, everybody, and we'll see you throughout the week. Stay safe, everyone.
Thanks, Chris. Bye.